Hi everyone, this is Mr. Zhang, and today we'll be going over math homework for Class P. This is for session U11. All right, for question number 1, if 5x plus 2x plus 6 is equal to 3x plus x plus 12, what is the value of x? So here you have to first combine like terms. So on the left side you have 5x and 2x, which combines to 7x if you add the coefficients, instead of that plus 6. Now on the right side, that's equal to 3x plus 1x. You could put that invisible 1 coefficient there. So that's will be 4x, and you still have that 12. Now from here, you got to move all the x's to one side. So you have to subtract 4x from both sides. And then you want to move all the constants to the other side. So you got minus 6. So that'll give you 3x left over on the left and 6 on the right. Then you divide both sides by 3 to solve for x, just using inverse operations, and you get that x is equal to 2. And that's choice E. All right, so here, notice figure not drawn on scale. In the figure above, if lines Q and R are not parallel, which of the following must be true? So Q and R are not parallel, which means that they'll intersect. So here, if they look like they were parallel, so if they were parallel, you know that A would have to be equal to B if parallel. And that's because A and B are called corresponding angles. Or they would be corresponding angles if it were parallel. But since they're not parallel, we know that A cannot be equal to B. So that's choice A. That's just the opposite would also be true. All right, so for corresponding angles, if you have a pair of parallel lines, you have a line cutting through, then corresponding angles would have that letter F formation. In this case, it would be a backwards F. And they would be equal. But since they're not parallel, that means that they can't be equal. All right, next for number 3, what is the value of 7g times 3h plus 9 if h is equal to 6? So you just replace h with 6 and replace or substitute the variable of h with 6. So you would have 7g times, instead of 3h, you'll have 3 times 6 plus 9. So that would be 7g times 18 plus 9, or 7g times 27. So 27 times 7, that would be 189. So you have 189g. And that's choice D. All right, next for question number 4, the Jones family is going on vacation. The 5 members of the family will sit in the same room on an airplane that has 2 seats on one side and 3 seats on the other. The 2 oldest children will sit together on one side of the plane that only has 2 seats. The parents and the youngest child will sit together on the 3 seats on the other side. How many different seating arrangements are possible? So if you have seating arrangements, this is a counting principle question. So for counting principle questions, you want to draw blanks for positions, and you always want to do the restrictions first. So in this case, you actually have 2 counting restrictions, which is an aisle in between. So for these 2 seats, it's actually the 2 oldest children. So we don't know what they are, so let's call them A and B. So here you have A or B for the first position. So you have 2 options. And then you just have the last one. The other person that wasn't chosen, so that's just 1 option here. So for counting principle, you always want to multiply the choices you have for each slot. In this case, you have 2 times 1, which is 2. You can also figure it out really quickly to the A, B, or BA. So you have 2 choices here. Now, for the 3 seats, you actually have now 3 options because you have the parents and the youngest child. So let's call them X, Y, and Z. And they're just going to sit on the other side of the plane. So you have 3 options for the first position. You have X, Y, or Z. then whichever one gets chosen, you only have two left to choose from. And for the last position, you have only one last one, the last person who remains. And if you multiply them together, you will get 6. So this would be x, y, z, x, z, y, y, x, z, y, z, x, and finally z, x, y, and z, y, x. And those are your 6 options. So we have 2 options for the seats on the left, 6 options for the seats on the right. You want to then multiply both of these. 2 times 6 would be equal to 12. So that would be choice C. And again, you multiply because the counting principle, you always want to multiply for the number of choices that you are given. Next, for question number 5, 18 is what percent of 45? So you can turn this into a number sentence, or you can use an is of. Remember, the is the part, of is the whole. So is equals part, and of is whole. So it's really just is over of, or part over whole. And that's 18 over 45. Now, you can simplify this. If you divide by 9, that would be 2/5. And then to turn this into percentage, you can multiply by 100%. And the 100 and the 5 cross cancels, give you 20, and 20 times 2 is 40%, which is choice D. Next, for number 6, if 3 is less than the absolute value of x is less than 5, and 4 is less than the absolute value of y is less than 6, which of the following must be true? All right, so here for the absolute value, remember the absolute value could be positive or negative. So if x is positive, then the absolute value of x is just equal to x. But if x is negative, then the absolute value of this negative number will be the negative of that negative number. And of course, the negative of negative is going to be positive. So here, we know that the absolute value of x is between 3 and 5. So we don't know whether or not x is positive or negative. So we can actually come up with 2 choices. If x is positive, then the absolute value of x is just equal to x. The absolute value goes away. So you know that 3 is less than x, less than 5. But if x is negative, then the absolute value of x is equal to negative x. So that would be 3 is less than negative x, less than 5. And here, if you want to multiply both all the sides by -1, you have to flip the inequality sign. So you always want to flip the inequality if you want to multiply and divide by -1. So you have -3, -5, now positive x, and the inequality sign gets flipped. So you have 2 solutions, or 2 ranges of solutions here. And the same is true for the y. So for y, it would be between 4 and 6, or -4 and -6. Now, what you can do is to figure out which of the following has to be true. Well, go through all the choices, and you can just eliminate. So choice A says y has to be less than x. Well, that could be true if y is, let's say, negative and x is positive, but you can also have x represented by -4, and y could be positive 5. That would actually satisfy both of these inequalities, so A is wrong. It doesn't have to be true. The keyword is must. It means 100% true. For choice B, it's the same idea. Also wrong, because x doesn't have to be less than y. X could actually be positive, y could be negative. Now, choice C says that both of them, if you multiply it together, it has to be positive. Again, that's not true, because if x is -4, over here, y could be, let's say, positive 5, and positive times a negative number is negative. That would eliminate choice C. For choice D, if you multiply them together and then you do the absolute value, it has to be greater than 12. And we can see that has to be true because the smallest possible value for x is this 3. For the smallest for y is a 4. And 3 times 4 is 12. So if you multiply x and y, the absolute value of that has to be greater than 12. So the answer is going to be choice D. Now we can also go through the other choices as well, specifically for choice E. X plus y has to be greater than 7. So that doesn't have to be true. For example, if x is equal to 5 and y, or not 5, if x is equal to positive 4 and y is equal to negative 5, if you do x plus y here, that would be 4 plus negative 5, which is negative 1. And the absolute value of negative 1 is equal to positive 1, and 1 is not greater than 7. So E would be wrong. The only choice left is D. So for number 6, it's important to guess and check. And you have to use the definition of absolute value, which is over here. As well as when you solve inequalities, you have to flip the inequality sign if you multiply or divide by negative numbers. All right, next for number 7, the median of n consecutive odd integers is 6. What's the average of the n integers? Well, the shortcut here is just choice D. If you have a list of consecutive numbers, which is just numbers in a pattern, so basically an adding pattern, the average is equal to the median. So if the average is, if the median is 6, the average also has to be 6 as well. And that's because if you pair them up in a specific way for consecutive numbers, they'll always pair up very nicely. So if you can count by 2s, for example, they'll pair up in a very symmetric way. And then when you divide, everything's kind of symmetric. All right, next for number 8, in the correctly worked addition problem above, J, K, and L represent distinct digits. What's the value of the digit L? All right, so here you have J plus K, and that's equal to 18. Well, the only way to get 18 is by doing 9 plus 9. Now, you can't have that because they have to represent distinct digit. Distinct means different. So it can't be 9 plus 9. So that means that you have to borrow this 1. And it'll have to be 9 plus 8. Because that's the only other way to get 18. So one of them is 9. The other one is 8. Now, if you notice for the other side, it's just K and then J. So it has to be either 98 plus 89 or 89 plus 98. It's going to be one of those. So if you add both, you can actually see that it'll be pretty much the same thing. Either way, L has to be equal to 7. You don't know if J is equal to 8 or 9 is equal to, or K is equal to 8. But no matter what, L has to be 7. All right, and here is the summary for this page. All right, next for number 9, in the figure above, a small parallelogram is inscribed in a large parallelogram. What's the value of x? So one property of parallelograms is that the opposite sides, or opposite angles, I should say, are equal. The opposite sides are equal too, but here we have angles, so start with that. So if the opposite angles are equal, 130 has to be 130. And now, the other thing that you can use for parallelograms is that adjacent angles are supplementary, which means they add up to 180 degrees. So this angle plus that 130 has to be 180. So 180 minus 130 is equal to 50. So this angle has to be 50. so must the other one, because opposite angles are equal. So now once you have the angles here, you can then figure out that the other parallelogram works the same way. So if this angle is 80 degrees, well, so is this one. And now this angle has to be 180 minus 80, which is equal to 100. So this will be 100 degrees, and so will the bottom angle. Now from there, you can actually zoom in on this triangle here. And you know that in a triangle, the angles add up to 180 degrees as well. So you have 100 degrees, and you have the 20 degrees. So that's 120 so far. 180 minus 120 is equal to 60. So that has to be the angle here. And then, the last piece of the puzzle, you have a straight line around this point. So that means that these angles are supplementary because they make up a straight line. So a straight line is supplementary. Those angles add up to 180 as well. So far you have 50 degrees plus 60 degrees. So that's equal to 110. Then you can do 180 minus 110, which is equal to 70. So this has to be 70 degrees for X, which is choice C. All right, so here you have to use a couple of facts. Here specifically, you need to know that for a parallelogram, opposite angles are equal, and adjacent angles are supplementary, which means they add up to 180 degrees. Then, when you zoom in, you know that triangles add up to 180 degrees, and so are supplementary angles, or straight angles. All right, so those are the key facts that you need to know that are highlighted. All right, next for number 10, in the figure above, line AE, is parallel to line BD. And if AE is equal to 9 and BD is equal to 6, and the area of triangle ACE is 54, what is the area of triangle BCD? All right, so AE is parallel to BD. And when you have that, you have corresponding angles. So angle CBD corresponds to angle A, and angle CDB corresponds to angle E. These are corresponding angles. And corresponding angles are supplementary, are equal, So that means that if you have the setup of corresponding angles, those angles will be equal. And that's exactly the setup that we have here, that letter F. Now, once you know that they are equal, you can actually establish that these two triangles are similar. So triangle CBD is similar to triangle CAE. And when you have similar, you have sides are proportional. And that the angles are equal. Corresponding angles anyway. So once you establish that, you know that the base is 6 up here, bottom is 9. So you know that 6 times 1.5 is equal to 9. So you know the big triangle is 1.5, the small triangle multiplied by 1.5 is equal to the big triangle. Now the area of the big triangle is 54. So remember that's area equals 1/2 base times height. So if the area is equal to 54, it's going to be equal to 1/2. The base is going to be 9 times the height, which you don't know what it is, but we can figure it out. So from here, you can divide by 9 on both sides. You get that 6 is equal to 1/2 of h. And then you can multiply those sides by 2. You get that h is equal to 12. So the height of the big triangle is 12. But that means that the height of the smaller triangle, you don't know what it is, so we can call it x. Well, x times 1.5 has to be 12. So 1.5x has to be equal to 12 because, again, of similar triangles here. So if you divide by 1.5 on both sides, you have x is equal to 12 over 1.5. You can Move the decimal over. And 120 divided by 15 is equal to 8. So x would have to be equal to 8. 8 times 1.5 is equal to 12. So now you have all the information to figure out the area of the top triangle, BCD, because the base is equal to 6 and the height is equal to 8. So it'll be 1/2 6 times 8, or 3 times 8, which is 24. So that's going to be choice C. Next, for number 11, if r is a remainder when a positive integer is divided by a single-digit prime number or integer, what is the largest possible value of r? So it's the remainder or the leftovers when a positive number is divided by a single-digit prime integer. So you don't know what the number is, but you're dividing it by a single-digit prime integer. So if you want the biggest remainder, then you want to make this number divisor here really, really big. So the biggest single-digit prime number is 7. So when we have some number divided by 7, you'll have some quotient and the remainder. Now, the biggest remainder you can have if you're dividing by 7 is a remainder of 6. You can't have a remainder of 7, because if you have a remainder of 7, then you have to add 1 to the quotient. That's a whole. All right, next for number 12 here. If r, s, t, and u are consecutive integers such that r is less than s is less than t is less than u, which of the following is the median of these integers? Again, they are consecutive, and we know that for a list of consecutive numbers, the average is equal to the median. So to figure out the median, you take the middle two numbers, s and t, and divide it by 2. Now, I don't see that as any of the choices, but what I do see is another choice. Remember, if s, r, s, t, and u are in this order, r plus u has to be equal to s plus t. Again, you can model this using smaller integers such as 1, 2, 3, 4. If they follow a pattern, the first and the last number will add up to the same sum as the middle two numbers. That's will always happen. Or even count by, you can start at a random number here. 10 plus 16 is 26. 12 plus 14 is also 26. So you can have r plus u divided by 2 as well. They're equal. So the answer would be choice A. You can also plug in and model this question using smaller numbers to get the same result. All right, next for number 13, in triangle DEF, the measure of angle EFD is less than the measure of angle EDF, which of the following must be true. So let's start with a triangle here. We have triangle DEF. The measure of angle EFD, which is this one, is less than the measure of angle EDF. And you want to know which of the following is true, and a whole bunch of these correspond to sides. Well, for triangles, the larger the angle, the longer the opposite side. And that's always true because the larger the angle is, the opposite side, in order to connect those two sides, will have to be really, really wide. Whereas if the angle is really small, the third side, the opposite side, would also be really small. So here, because angle EDF is large, that means that side EF will actually be longer. So EF will be greater than DE, the side here. So this would be a short side, this would be a long side. here is the summary for this page. All right, next for number 14, the sum of the odd integers between 80 and 90, inclusive, which means including both of them, is what fraction of the sum of the integers between 80 and 90 inclusive? So you want to add the odd integers between 80 and 90. So that's 81 plus 83, 85, 87, and 89. And is what fraction of the even numbers? So that's, fraction of all the integers. So just 80 plus 81 plus 82, 86, 87, 88, 9, and 90. All right, so we have a whole bunch of numbers here. And because they are consecutive, you can pair them up really nicely. For example, 89 and 81, and 87 and 83. So that's 170 and 85. So if you add 170 plus 170 plus 85, you get 425 for the numerator. All right, and then for the bottom part, I have 80 to 90. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pairs, and it's 80 plus 90, which is 170. So it's 850, and you still have that 85. To have 935. All right, and then you just want to simplify this this fraction. So if you divide by 5, then for 935, divide by 5. Okay, so now I want to see if you can divide by anything else. So here you can't divide by 3 in the denominator because the sum is 16. You can't divide by 4 or 5. You can try dividing by some of the other numbers. So you can't divide the numerator by 7 or anything. But if you try, let's say 17, because I know 85 is 17 times 5. 187 divided by 17. Yeah, so there you go. You have 11. So if you divide by 17, you get 5 in the numerator. Divide by 17, you get 11 in the denominator, and that's choice C, 5 over 11. All right, next for number 15, in a correctly worked matrix multiplication shown above, what's the value of x? All right, so you don't have to worry about this for the exam anytime soon, but for matrix multiplication, that's something you'll do later on in high school, but here for matrix, it's just an array of numbers. So here, the first matrix is a 3 by 2 because it's 3 rows by 2 columns. And the second one is a 2 by 2 square matrix. Now, if you multiply 2 matrices, that's 3 by 2 and 2 by 2. Essentially, the middle numbers cancel out, and the resulting matrix will be a 3 by 2, which is exactly what you have. It's another 3 rows and 2 columns. So what you want to do when you multiply a matrix is you take the first column. You want to take the first row and multiply it by each of these columns. So that's the pattern here. So when you take this row of 3 and 2 and you multiply it by this column and then this column, you'll get a number in each of the positions. So, for example, 3 by 2 multiplied by 1 and 5. So you take the 3 and you multiply by 1. And then you take the 2 and you multiply by 5. And you add them up. So it's really just multiplying and adding. And that's 3 plus 10. So you go to 13. And that's where that 13 comes from. So it's 3 times 1 plus 2 times 5. All right, and then for the next number, for that 4, it's going to be 3 times 2, but now you're multiplying by 0 and 2. So this would be 3 times 0 plus 2 times 2. And that's how you get 0 plus 4, which is just 4. So just to, do some more practice to get the next row here, it would be the middle one, negative 2 and 1, with the first column. So this would be negative 2 times 1 plus 1 times 5. So negative 2 times 1, and then 1 times 5. And that's negative 2 plus 5, which is positive 3. So it makes sense. Then for the next one, you would have the same negative 2 and 1, sometimes at 0 and 2. So it's negative 2 times 0 plus the next set, 1 times 2. And that's how you get 2. Right, then finally for the last one, you have x and negative 1, and then just 1 and 5. So this would be x times 1 plus negative 1 times 5. So you know that this is x minus 5 is equal to negative 1. So we just add 5 to both sides. You get x is equal to 4. And that's really the only one you need to do to get the answer of choice E. But I did want to practice for, some of the other ones. All right, and then just to finish this matrix off, to get the last number, negative 2, you'll have there to check your work. This would be x times 0, which you can't actually use check your work, will be gone, plus negative 1 times 2. And that's how you get negative 2. That's how you solve for matrices. But again, don't worry about that too much. We'll talk about it later in high school. All right, and here's the summary for this page. All right, for number 1, what's the value of the square root of x plus square root of y times x plus y when x is equal to 16 and y is equal to 4? So replace all the x's with 16, and then replace all the y's with 4. So you'll have square root of 16 plus square root of 4 times 16 plus 4. Now, 16 and 4 are both perfect squares, so this will just turn to 4 plus 2. And this is 20. So this is just 6 times 20, which is 120. Choice B. All right, next for number 2, the perimeter of ABCD is 36, and W is equal to 2x, and x plus 4 is equal to y, and z is equal to x plus 2. What's the value of x? So you have everything in terms of x now, so you can just add up x plus x plus 4 plus 2x plus x plus 2. So that would be plus x plus 2 and then plus 2x. Here you can combine like terms. If you count all the x's, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5x plus 6 is equal to 36. So from here, if you subtract 6 from both sides, you get that 5x is equal to 30, and then you can divide by 5. And you get that x is equal to 6, which is choice E. All right, next for number 3, if the number of male students and female students in each of the 3 classes is equal, and the average number of males in each class is 30, what is the total number of students in all 3 classes? So here I have male and female students of the 3 classes are equal, and the average number of males is 30. So since they're equal, you'll have 30 males in each class, but also 30 females in each class. So if you add everything together, you have 60 in each. And so you have 60 in each. Add those 3 together, you get 180 total, choice E. All right, next for number 4, if the square root of s is less than s, which of the following must be true? So if you square root a number, in general, the number gets smaller. For example, the square root of 25 is equal to 5. And of course, 25 is much greater than 5. So eventually, though, if you get to, let's say, the square root of 1/4, that's going to be equal to 1/2. And here, 1/2 is actually greater than 1/4. So if the number s is greater than 1, choice C, if it's a whole number greater than 1, then this would be true. So here you can just plug in numbers to test it out. Next for number 5, David is D years old. In D over 5 years, Marco will be twice as old as David is now. What is Marco's age now in terms of D? So to solve these age problems, you have to do a chart. So you have David and Marco. So now David is D years old. And in D over 5 years. So that's the future. So if you add D over 5, Marco will be twice as old as David is now. So David is now D. Marco will be twice as old. And twice means times 2. So Marco will be 2D. And now you want to know Marco's age in terms of D. So remember, to go from Marco's age to Marco's age in the future, you have to add D over 5. So to go backwards, then, you have to subtract D over 5. So what you're really doing is 2D minus D over 5. And here the LCD is 10. So right now 2D has a denominator of 1. So if you multiply by 10, or sorry, the LCD is 5, not 10. If you multiply that by 5 over 5, that would be 10D over 5 minus D over 5. And the numerator will be 10D minus D, or 9D. And the denominator stays the same. So the answer will be choice B, 9D over 5. So again, to solve these age problems, you want to set up a chart. So Marco's 9D over 5 years old. If you add D over 5, that would be 10D over 5, or 2D. So 2D is 2 times D. All right, next for number 6, line AB and CD line in the XY coordinate plane, and AB has a slope of 1/2 and a y-intercept of -3. CD intersects the origin and is perpendicular to AB. What's the slope of CD? So because here the keyword is perpendicular. Perpendicular lines, they have negative reciprocal slopes. And that's just the fact that you need to memorize. So what that means is a negative reciprocal means that if you have, let's say, a fraction of 1/2, you have to do 2 things to get the negative reciprocal. You have to first negate it, and you have to do the reciprocal, which means you have to do a flip. So you flip the fraction, 1/2 becomes 2 over 1, and then you negate it. So positive becomes negative, and negative becomes positive. So this turns to a slope of The perpendicular line is the slope of -2. And that's choice E. All right, and here's the summary for this page. All right, next for question number 7. Which of the following most closely approximates the slope of the line that would best fit the scatter plot? So the line of best fit will cut through about half of these points. So it kind of connects this point of 0, 4 to this point down here in 4, 0. So the slope of these 2 points, the slope will be change of y over change in x, or y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So the 2 points will be 4, 0 and 0, 4. So for change in y, it will be 4 minus 0, and then for the change in x, you want to keep the same order, so it's 0 minus 4. That's going to be 4 over -4 or -1. So that will be choice B. All right, next for number 8, a random shape is a shape that has at least 2 right angles, and the sum of the remaining angles is 180 degrees. Which of the following shapes must be a random shape? So here for choice A, you have these two 90 degrees, which is fine, but these 3 angles won't be 180 degrees. We see that this is obtuse, so it's greater than 90, and so is this one. And when you add 2 obtuse angles together, it's already greater than 180. So A is wrong. For choice B, this is a reflex angle, so this is actually greater than 180 degrees, so B can't be it. For choice C, you only have 1 right angle, so that's wrong. You need 2. Then for choice D, you have 3 right angles, which again, you only have, you actually could have this because you have at least 2. 3 is at least 2. However, it suffers the same problem as choice A. You have 2 obtuse angles. So D is wrong. And finally, for choice E, you have 2 90 degrees, which is fine. And these 2 angles are probably going to be 180 degrees. One of them is obtuse, and one of them is acute. So you can have a possibility in which both of these add up to 180 degrees. The other part is that it's a trapezoid, or it's a quadrilateral, and the total is 360 degrees. 290 degrees is 180, so 360 minus 180 has to be 180 for the last 2 angles. So here's a summary for this page. All right, next for number 9, if z times z to the 4th times z cubed squared is equal to z to the 3x, then x is equal to. So here you have to use the laws of exponents. The first law is if you multiply 2 exponents with the same base, you can add the exponents. So here you're going to have to add 4 plus 3, which is 7. So you have that z times z to the 7th squared. And now you're going to do order of operations. So the exponent will be the next step. So to do the exponent, you have to do a power to a power. B to the a to the c power is b to the a times c. So this would be z times z to the 7 times 2, which is 14. And then for the last rule, you just use the first rule again. Multiply 2 exponents to the same base. I'm going to add the exponents. So this will be z to the 15th. And that's on the left side. And now this is equal to z to the 3x. So you know that the exponents have to be equal to one another because the bases are the same. So if 15 is equal to 3x, you know that x has to be equal to 5. So the answer would be choice B. So for this question, I have to use the 2 laws of exponents. Multiply 2 exponents to the same base, add the exponents. Power to a power, you want to multiply the exponents. Next for number 10, if x is equal to yz and 1/2 of y is equal to w and z is equal to 4w, then in terms of x, what does w equal? So now z is equal to 4w, so you can replace z with 4w. So x, instead of being y times z, will be equal to y times 4w. Now you also know that w is equal to 1/2 of y. So if w is equal to 1/2 of y, you can actually replace some of these variables. Or actually, you want to figure out what w is equal to. So let me restart here. If you want to know what w is equal to, you want to isolate w. So you actually want to replace all the other variables. So you have x is equal to y times z. Again, you want to replace z with w. So the first step would be the same. It would be x times y times, or x is equal to y times 4w. I want to keep the w there. And you don't want the y. So now you'll take this equation, 1/2 of y is equal to w. Well, if you multiply both sides by 2, the 2 and the 1/2 will cancel out because they are inverses. Y will be equal to 2w. So then you can replace this y with 2w. So you have x is equal to 2w times 4w. Or x is equal to 8w squared. Now we can solve for w by doing inverse operations. So first, you're going to divide by 8. So x over 8 is equal to w squared. And then the next step, you have to do the square root of both sides. And that will cancel out the power of 2. So w will be equal to the square root of x over 8. And that is choice A. All right, next for number 11. So here it says, if m raised to the third power is equal to m to the 15th divided by m to the n, and n is a positive integer, what's the value of n? Well, here I have to use the law of exponent, specifically the law of exponents that says that b to the a over b to the c, when you divide two exponents over the same base, you have to subtract the exponents. So you want to do m to the 15th over m to the n is equal to m to the 15 minus n. And we're told this is equal to m cubed. So the exponents here have to be equal. So that means that 15 minus n has to be equal to 3. So n has to be equal to 12. Because 15 minus 12 is equal to 3. All right, next for number 12, if the ratio of blue balls to red balls is 2.5 to 4, there are 25 blue balls, how many red balls are there? All right, so blue to red is 2.5 to 4. Now, the actual blue is 25, so you can see that 2.5 times 10 is 25, so you also have to multiply the other side by 10. So the actual ratio will be 25 to 40. So for red, that will be R is equal to 40. All right, next for number 13, a certain number y has a remainder of 3 when divided by 5. And the same number has a remainder of 2 when divided by 4. If y is an integer between 10 and 40, what's one possible value for y? So y divided by 5 equals some quotient remainder of 3. And you know that the 5 times table ends in 0 or 5. Now, if you have a remainder of 3, that means that y must end in 3 or 8. That way you have a remainder of 3. Now for the other part, you have if you divide by 4, you have some other quotient, remainder 2. There's going to be 2 more than a multiple of 4. So you just write out all the numbers that are between 10 and 40 that ends in 3 or 8. So 13, 18, 23, 28, 33, or 38. So those are the only 6 numbers to try. Just go through each one. You want to make sure it's 2 more than a multiple of 4. So 13 is not 2 more than a multiple of 4, so you can limit that. And either is 23 or 33. All the multiples of 4 are even. So 2 more than a multiple of 4 means that y has to be even. So we can't end in 3. Then try 18. Well, 18 is 16 plus 2. So if you do 18 divided by 4, you get a remainder of 2. So that's definitely it. Now, 28 is a multiple of 4, so you have a remainder of 0. So that can't be it. And for 38, it's also 2 more than a multiple of 4. It's 36 plus 2. So if you divide by 4, you get 9 remainder 2. So the two answers are 18 or 38. All right, so you just bubble in one of them. All right, next for number 14, 4 consecutive odd integers add up to 80. What's the least of these integers? All right, so we have 4 consecutive odd integers or whole numbers. And remember, consecutive means one after the other. And there's a pattern. So they all add up to 80. So remember, if you have a list of consecutive numbers, the average is equal to the median. So the average is a total divided by the number of data, which in this case, the total is 80, and the number of data, you have 4. So the average is equal to 20. So that means that's also the median. Now, because you have a list of 4 numbers, 20 would be right in the middle. So that's the average of these two odd numbers. So the two odd numbers between 20 is 19 and 21. So then you have to just follow the pattern. And you figure out that the pattern is plus 2 because it's odd. The smallest number is 17. So again, you use the fact that if you have consecutive numbers, the average is equal to the median. So if you find the average of 20, you also can find the median. And then just fill out the numbers. Right, for number 15, a model plane is built to scale such that each 2 1/4 centimeters of the model represents 3 meters of the actual plane. If the length of the model plane's wing is 12 centimeters, what's the length in meters of the actual plane's wing? So here you have this scale. You can use that to make a proportion. 2 1/4 centimeters corresponds with 3 meters. So on the model, the wing is 12 centimeters. So that's going to correspond with X meters. So from here, you can set up your proportion because the units line up and then just cross multiply. So 2 1/4 is really 2.25. Or you can also turn this into a this mixed number to an improper fraction, which is 9/4. So that's really 9/4 X is equal to 12 times 3 or 36. And now to solve for X, you multiply by the reciprocal, which is the upside down fraction on both sides. And that will help you cross cancel everything inside a fraction. You just have X on the left side, isolated by itself, which is what we're looking for. And on the right side, you have 36 and 9 cross cancel for 4 times 4, which is 16. So X is equal to 16. The actual wing is 16 meters long. So here, because you have this proportion, you have this model, the keyword is model here, everything has to be proportional. So you just set up a proportion by lining up the units, so centimeters over centimeters, meters over meters. And once you set that up, you can just cross multiply and solve. All right, next for number 16, an old-fashioned bicycle has 2 different size tires, with the front tire larger than the rear. If the front tire of one such bicycle has a circumference of 63 inches and the back has a circumference of 27, how many revolutions would the back tire have made if the front tire made 3 revolutions? So here, the circumference is the distance around the circle. So there's a bike in which the front tires are really, really big and the back is really, really small. So here the front has 63 and the back circumference is just 27. So if the front tire made 3 revolutions, a revolution is just a full circle. So you made 3 of them. Well, 63 times 3 is going to be 189. And now the circumference of the back is only 27. So you have to do 189 divided by 27. So here you can just kind of estimate. Multiply by 7. That'll be perfectly 189. So it would have made 7 revolutions. All right, next for number 17, Vince's average bowling score for 5 games was 106. The average score for the first 2 games was 102, and the average for the next 2 was 108. What was the score of his 5th game? So here you have 5 games. So remember, average is the total divided by the number of data. So you know that the first 2 games, the average was 102. So you can just say that essentially you got 102 on the first 2 games. Again, you don't know if you actually got 102, but they have to add up to the same. So if you do 102 is equal to the total divided by 2, you know that the total of these 2 games has to be 204. And that's what 102 and 102 is equal to. It doesn't really matter what we want for the first 2 because we just are interested in the last game. So again, doing the same logic for the next 2 games. The average was 108. You can do total divided by 2 is equal to 108 and then just multiply by 2. Or you could just put 108 on both. So if you add everything up so far, you have 102, 102, 108, and 108. You have 420 so far. Now the average for 5 games is 106. So 106 would be equal to the total divided by 5. And you multiply both sides by 5. That would be 530. So 530, that's a total. Subtract 420, which is what you have, will be 110. So his last score has to be 110. So again, for this one, you just use the definition of average. All right, next for number 18. The 3 faces of a rectangle solid have areas of 6, 10, and 15. If the dimension of the rectangle solid are all integers, what's the volume of the solid? All right, so here, there's a really neat trick that you can use. If you have the area of the 3 rectangular faces with length with height, you know that one of them is length times height, the other one is width times height, and the one on top is length times width. So if you have LW is equal to 6, let's say LH is equal to 10, and then WH is equal to 15. It doesn't really matter what you call for each. You have 3 equations and 3 variables, so you could solve for each of them using substitution. But the trick here is if you take L, W, and H and you multiply all 3. So you multiply all 3, that would be equal to L squared times H squared times W squared. And that's equal to 6 times 10 times 15. So this is going to be 900. And that's equal to L squared times H squared times W squared, or LHW all squared. And if you do the square root on both sides, they'll cancel out the power of 2, and you just get LWH is equal to the square root of 900, or just 30. And that happens to be the formula for the volume. So the volume here is 30. The trick is to multiply 6, 10, and 15, and then just do the square root. And that's because you have LH, WH, and LW. So you have these 3 equations that you can use to solve for all 3 variables. All right, next for number 19. If, in the figure above, the shaded region has an area of 3, what's the area of the rectangle ABCD? All right, so here it's actually really symmetric. This piece will cover up that piece. So this box will be 3. And you can actually make 4 of those boxes. So if each piece is equal to 3, then just 3 times 4, that's equal to 12. Again, you don't have figure not drawn on a scale or anything, so I have to assume the figure is drawn on a scale. And you can just set everything up. So you have 1/4 covered. So 1/4 is equal to 3, so 4/4 is equal to 12. All right, next for number 20. If f of x is equal to 5x plus 2 divided by 3 minus 2x minus 4 divided by 3, what's the value of f of x minus x? So here you have f of x is just equal to this thing. So you just replace this function with 5x plus 2 over 3 minus 2x minus 4 over 3, and you're subtracting x. Now, for those two, the LCD is 3. So you can just combine the numerators. You just have 5x plus 2, and now you're subtracting the second thing in parentheses, 2x minus 4. So you got to be careful here, because you have 5x minus 2x, which is 3x, but you have 2, positive 2, minus negative 4. And 2 minus negative 4 is equal to 2 plus 4, or 6. So the numerator is literally 3x plus 6. Again, it's positive 2 minus negative 4. And you divided this by 3. So you can actually factor out 3 in the numerator. That'll give you x plus 2 left over. And once you cancel out the 3, that's equal to, you just got to subtract x. So x plus 2 minus x is just equal to 2. So the only thing that's left is just 2. So just be careful here. If you have to subtract with parentheses, have to subtract a negative. The other way you can do this is to distribute the negative sign. So that will turn into 5x plus 2 minus 2x. And when you distribute the negative sign, where there's negative 1, it's negative 1 times negative 4, or positive 4. So that would be 5x minus 2x, or 3x plus 6. All right, and here's the summary for this page. All right, thank you everyone for joining me today. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll talk to everyone later. All right, bye everyone.